record to this computer. All right, so we're recording. Everybody keep the language to a minimum. And let's get started. So what I have here is I have a basic boilerplate, just create React app that I spooled up. It's got nothing installed, just the stuff that comes with the package. And I also have the documentation up for the Rick and Morty API. Oh, by the way, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, so GraphQL, we're not going to worry about that. We're more worried about the REST API side of things. So the API gives us a base URL to start. And then here you get like extensions off the base API. So like if we wanted characters, it would be this URL/characters. It kind of shows you right here that URL location or episodes. Info and pagination, this comes across. Let's see, they have a count, which is the length of the response, the pages, the amount of pages available, and a next URL and a previous URL, which that's really cool because we could tie those URLs right into another request and hook up some like next and previous buttons if we wanted to, if we want to create page pagination with this. And we can see what a response object looks like for characters. So we get our data object would have an info key that would have all the page information with the next previous. And we'd have a results, which I'm going to guess, and actually I know I've done this API a couple times. Results is where our characters are going to live. So we can kind of model our state to match this a little bit. We can model our state to be just a success message. I mean, that's kind of a mutable thing that you can play with as you're doing a project. So the first thing I like to do when I get started with one of these is immediately just get rid of all this boilerplate stuff. So I'll just go into app.js and I'm gonna wipe out everything but the div. And in here, I'm just gonna put in a good old H1 and I'm gonna name it Rick and Morty. So now when I save this, we should just see Rick and Morty on the screen. Yeah, cool. All right, so next thing I want to do is I'm gonna add packages. I know that we're building our React Redux app, so I know I'm gonna need like Axios for my endpoint calls. I'm gonna need React Redux, Thunk, Logger. I'm a big fan of. Anybody think of any other packages that we might need? Going once, going twice. All right, we're gonna install those. So npm I. We'll go React Redux, Axios, Redux Thunk, and Redux Logger. Let's go get all the things. And now we get to watch NPM. It's like watching paint dry. Just kind of hope it all goes through with no whammies. But while that's coming in, we can go ahead and start implementing some things like our file structure. Now, the file structure I personally like to use, because I see it in the workplace during the day, is almost like a view state, kind of like subdirectory system, to where like every file has its own, like you'd have views as a directory. Inside the views would be another folder with your components. Your components, when you click in there, would have the actual JavaScript or JSX component. It would also have a style sheet specific to that component. And if you're doing a lot of TypeScript stuff, you normally have your types file for that component in there as well. And then global components like would be in a file called globals, which you would see like buttons, any kind of special containers that you use. Some forms would be stuck in there if they're reusable. Things like that you could drag in. Those would all also carry their own little mini style sheets as well. So everything stays real compartmentalized. So if you got to go back in and change something, you know right where to go, how to change it, and then how to ship it out. So let's create a file structure. We'll start with create a new folder. We'll call this views. All right, views. And inside here, we know we're gonna have. I'm going to create another folder in here called characters. We'll create another folder in here. Actually, it's probably just going to be characters. It's going to seem really redundant right now because it's not going to be a really large app. I'm going to go to the source level and I'm going to create another folder called state. State is where I like to just determine where all my state's going to live, like my reducers, my actions, so on and so forth. I'll have all live in there. And we're only going to be using one action and one reducer, so I'll probably just define them as files. But when you see like multiple actions or multiple reducers, you'll normally see like an actions folder and a reducers folder in here. When you open the reducers folder, there'll be a list of like 4 or 5 or 6 reducers in there. Same with the actions, and they'll all carry like a common name with the reducer they belong to. We won't be doing that today, but just keep that in mind when you get into a larger scale project. That's a good way to keep everything organized. So we got our state. So let's go ahead and we're going to create a first file. We're going to call this, we'll call it reducer.js. We're going to be real creative with the name of our reducer. And we'll create another one called actions. So we got 2 basic files, nothing crazy. And the first thing I like to do when I'm starting one of these projects is I like to think about what my initial state's going to be. So looking at the documentation of the API I'm going to consume and keeping in mind the finite state machine that we're going to be dealing with, I can get a good idea of how to start my initial state to start injecting it into my app even before I really get all the data I need. So we're going to create an initial state variable. So we'll say const initial state equal an object, because state is always an object with Redux. Keep that in mind too. You never want to set it to an array. It makes things very difficult when you do that. If you need an array, define an object, give that array a key, and give it, set that array to a value to make life a lot easier for you. So we know, can everybody tell me what the states of a finite state machine are generally for a web application in general?
Start.
All right, start. Can you be like that would be more like a loading phase, you would mean?
Yeah, it's loading. Yeah.
All right, cool. We'll make a loading state, and we're going to default that to false. We're going to use a Boolean because it's pretty much loading only has 2 states. It's either true or it's false. It's never really anything in between. There's no maybe for loading, right? What other state could happen? What other state would we have if something goes wrong? Like if we have an error, we don't want our users to just see that random, Google Chrome 404 error, right? We want to kind of like give them something nice to look at. Like Google gives you the unicorn when it 404s. What would we call that state?
So error message? Yeah. Is it error message or just error?
I like to use just error because you get a lot out of errors, especially if you wrap it in an object. So you kind of like, almost like you do with the use context, like what we were talking about before, Rhiannon, where you wrap a JavaScript variable in an object, you can access all of its keys. And you'd be surprised what's in that error object. If you, on your .catch where the error is, if you just wrap it in an object, return it, it's got all kinds of stuff in it. But for now, we're just going to default that to an empty string because we always want to check to see if it's defined or not. So an empty string is considered undefined, like false or any of the other really falsy values in JavaScript. And now we have our success state would be our last state. This is if everything goes well, we got data from the API, we want to populate the state for our application so we can render it to the screen. We can label this success if it's simple and we know we're only going to get one call. Obviously this one's info. It looks like our characters object has an info and a results. You know what? Let's just name this success, and we'll assign that whole object with the info and the results to that state. That way, if we use other pages that are like location or something like that, we can still use that same state and override it. So we'll call it success. And right now, we're just going to make that an empty object. It looks like it's going to be, yeah. All right, so we have the initial state. This is like the very basic setup first start. Any questions at this point?
No.
Moving on to reducer. Const reducer. to equal that function. And this function takes in two parameters. First one is state. The second one is the action object. And because we're in a Redux form where it's gonna render the reducer right away before it makes an API call or anything, you want to set a default value to the state, to the initial state. So your application immediately has access to those loading and error keys and such. If you don't do that, you just kind of get undefined back, and it can tend to throw errors. So we're going to set that to our initial state. And then a reducer, the way it works is it works on a switch case statement, which is like a giant if-else-if statement. That's basically what it is. It's just a cleaner way of writing it. Rather than having a bunch of if-else-ifs going around, you can have a switch with cases that run different sections of code depending on what matches the string when it comes in. So we're going to define the switch. And we're going to switch. We got to give it something to watch. So we're going to watch our action object, but we're going to watch the type. So we're going to give it a type. Wow, that was a big autocorrect there. That's probably because I misspelled action. That's awesome. Oh, we got some nasty typing today, people. Get ready. So we got to switch. And let's get rid of this nasty import we got here. And a switch always has, it's got multiple cases, but one thing that a switch is always going to have right off the bat is a default case. And in our case, for when this app initially fires off and runs, we want to just return the state, which will return our initial state because we have it defined here as a default for when that parameter comes in. So when this reducer function runs, if nothing's given to the state parameter, it's going to use this. And then the switch is going to run if it doesn't see any types because of the initial load. It's just going to return that state. So it kind of like chains up to here. And that's what we get for our initial value. So we have that set up, and we can verify this works by just connecting it to Redux and putting it in the app and see what happens. So let's do that. I just had an error up there. Come on. All right, so the next move is I'm going to connect this reducer. I'm going to connect it to Redux. So we're going to go into the index.js file. I like to use Redux at the top level, like here. And then I like to use like my router methods when I'm using React Router. I like to do them in app. Kind of keeps them separated. That's just a personal preference, but you guys can do as you will. So we're going to import all the things that we need for that. I know I'm going to need the provider from React Redux. I know I'm going to need two things from Redux. One is create store. The other one is apply middleware. Those come from Redux. And if you're wondering what the difference is, like what do I get from React Redux? What do I get from Redux? Remember that Redux lives outside of the React ecosystem. So Redux and the reducers, all that stuff, they're never, not a single component has access to that whole reducer or has access to those actions or anything like that. So Redux as a JavaScript library, not a React library, controls the store and the middleware when it's controlling that reducer. Any kind of React component that you're going to use in JSX or as a higher order component to wrap an original one, that's got to come from React Redux. Like your connect method would come from React Redux. If you use Redux hooks, which is a React specific component, that would come from React Redux. But your main basic Redux functions will come directly from the main library. All right, we need our reducer. Really creative reducer name. And this is living in state and in our reducer file. Let's go ahead and import, we need thunk from Redux thunk. And we need logger. I can't remember if these destructured or not, but we're about to find out. If not, I'm going to save this and it will yell at me if it doesn't like it. Not so far, so good. All right, so now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create our store. We're going to create our Redux store so we can start injecting our state into our application. And it's we'll call it store. You can name it whatever you want. This is a real banana term. And that's going to be using the create store method from Redux. This takes in two main arguments that you'll ever use. The first one is the reducer. So whatever reducer you're using, or if you're using combined reducers, this is where you'd put like your root reducer, the combination of them all. And the next one is the apply middleware method. This is what hijacks the communication between the reducer and Redux and kind of can control and check things. So the first argument we're going to give this is thunk. So we can use our asynchronous calls. And then the next one, oh, I'm getting a lot of noise there. I think I found it. Cool. And the next one is logger. Now, I think this might have changed with some new updates to it, but it used to be the case where logger always had to be last in the apply middleware method, because if it wasn't, it would block all the other ones that were chained in the parameters. So if you had logger before thunk, your asynchronous calls would never work. You would just see logger run. So I just got in the habit of putting it last. So now we haven't broken it yet. Let's wrap our app in our provider. Provider, grab app, move it up to the middle. And the provider takes one prop that's really important, and it's called store. That name is important. It has to be called store. But the JavaScript that you insert into it, we're going to use store because that's what we named our store, but it represents whatever name you gave to that create store method when you declared it on like line 12, the way we did. So assuming all that's going well, our app hasn't crashed yet. We'll give it a refresh just to, oh yeah, it did. Root reducer function instead receive undefined. Oh, where did I miss? What did I miss? Oh, I broke it. Awesome. Let's see why. Why is it broken? Did I misspell something? Reducer, create store. Receive undefined. Ooh, did I not export that? I didn't. Oh, that's why. Live debugging in action right there. Look at that. All right. So let's go back to index, make sure we're set up. And we are. So I'm just going to right away, I'm going to connect this to app. I'm going to check and see if I can see my state. So I'll do that by just importing connect. Connect does exactly as its name says. It connects. It's a higher order component that takes control of whatever component you pass it as its child. And this is going to come from React Redux because it's a React component. And we're going to come down to the bottom here. And we're going to wrap app with it. So connect. Open parentheses again. Back. And now we're connected. Now what connect does when you eventually give it parameters, it's going to inject everything that it gets from Redux through the props method of that component that is taking control of. But before we really do that, we're going to declare a function to get our state from Redux. So we can say const. I believe that I used to like map state to props. I get lazy a lot of times and just type this function in directly to connect as just an anonymous function, especially if it's only grabbing one variable. But for the terms of this, we're gonna name it, and I'm gonna give it a parameter. I'm just gonna call state. because that's what comes into this function. All of your state will come into this. That parameter represents everything that Redux has control of as far as state, the output of the reducer. And we're going to return object, and we'll just say we're going to return state. So this is a very basic function right now that's saying when this runs, whatever you give me, I'm just going to return as an object. And then we just inject that into connect. So we'll say map state to props. And right now we should see nothing when we inspect the page. It should not be working yet. So we'll open up this console, we'll take a look at it. And yeah, we're not seeing anything yet, but that's because we haven't brought in our props yet. So we'll bring in props here and we'll console log them. And we'll see what that looks like. Ooh, look at that. We see that right there? We've got, everybody can see we have a key called state now. The reason why we have a key called state is because that's the name given to it here. And if we open it up, it should look like our initial state. So if you see, we have an error, we have loading, we have success. Now, if you wanted to give this another name, like if it made sense to call this characters, you can. You just want to define it like so. And if you look now, our object name changed to characters rather than state, but the value is still the same. So to always think of it, to the left of the colon in an object is the name you're given some, almost like defining a constant variable name. That's what you're naming it. To the right is the value that it carries with that name. So we're connected. Now let's make an API call. Let's start building out an action to make an API call just to see if we get data. So here in our actions, I'm going to create my action strings. So these are actually really important. They eliminate a lot of errors. They do seem redundant, but I've caught many of not even students, but coworkers that didn't do this and would call me up and say, hey, can you take a look at my code? It's not working and I can't get an error and don't see anything happening. And it was because of this and a typo in a string. So we'll start with export const. We'll call this one loading. That'll equal a string of loading. We'll have one called error. Equal to a thing called error. Sounds good. We're being real creative tonight. And we'll call this success. So we have those declared for our 3 basic states that we have right now. And you can add to these and import them as you need them. If you have some things that are changing, like a put request or a pull request, anytime that you have to run some kind of different logic than what's already in your reducer, if you have to create another reducer case to do something different that's not there, you'd create another action string and so on and so forth. But if you're using the same logic, like let's say I'm making I have a success right there and I make a put request and I get my whole object back, I can still use that success string because it's doing the same thing as a get request at that point and use it to set my my state through my reducer. So just keep that in mind, that every action case should be a different portion of code, different logic in the reducer. If you're repeating yourself, you're defeating the purpose, as they say, of using this. So we're going to make a function. We'll call this, we're going to start with the get characters. We're going to just get all the characters. And this is a Redux thunk function, which is a function that returns a function. So it looks a little funky right there, but what is happening here, and this one we're going to give a label of dispatch. So what has happened is when this function is invoked, it returns this whole other function. And Thunk sees that function coming in. And what Thunk actually does is it's checking data types. If it sees an object come its way, it doesn't do anything. It just kind of lets it go to the reducer. So you can still like dispatch a loading object and it'll bypass Thunk and go right to the reducer. But when it sees a function coming into the reducer, it gives it access to dispatch and lets it run. And as it spits objects out, it starts dispatching those to the reducer itself. That's what allows you to run multiple dispatches within a function and within an API call. Any questions on that? Because that can be a little confusing. All right, I'm going to keep going. So here we're going to, first thing we want to do in this function fire is we want to dispatch loading. We're going to dispatch an object with a type, and it's going to be loading. Has no payload. We don't need a payload because that's just a Boolean. We could cycle that in our reducer. There's no need to pass data for that. And then we got to grab our Axios because we want to make an API call. So we're going to say import Axios from Axios. And let's make that call. Axios.get. What are we getting? Let's go find out what we're getting. We are getting, looks like it would be, where are we at? This API right here. This looks like us. Can I copy that? It looked a little funny. I wonder if it'll let me do it. Oh yeah, sweet. And I've got a little cheat sheet over here. I want to double check and make sure that's right. HTTPS// Rick and Morty API character. Cool. All right, so we're going to make our GET request, then we're going to have the happy path and the sad path. We're going to start with the happy path. It's going to give us a response. And for now, I always like to do this. We're going to console.log that response. Because even though the documentation says that's what we're supposed to get, documentation is often wrong. However, our error object is almost always the same, so I'm going to dispatch that error. And I'm going to give it an object with a type. And that type is going to be error. And my payload is going to take data. It's going to be that error that comes back, but wrapped in an object. And this will allow me access to like all the things that come back with the error. So I can display multiple things in my application if I choose. So we'll save that. We've got that ready. Now we just got to get this connected to Redux so we could check it out, make a call with it, and see if we get what we want. So we're going to go back in the app. I'm going to import that action. I think I called it get characters. Looks like it is completing. So from, and we're going to go to state actions. We've got that, and we're also going to need a Redux hook. And this might look a little funny if you guys haven't built a fresh app, but with the new updates to React, if you notice there's no import React from React up here anymore, and it still works because you don't have to. It's like included in the package now. So all we got to do is grab our hooks and other methods we might need. Use effect from React. We're going to come down here and we're going to invoke that use effect. So use effect takes a callback. We're going to throw our dependency array in right away so we don't over limit our API unnecessarily. And then I'm going to call get characters. Now, if I call this, you think anything's going to happen? I might get a console log, but I'm not going to get anything else. I didn't even get the console log. It didn't run. Does anybody know why? Everybody's overly quiet tonight. All right. Well, I'll tell you why. It's because Redux didn't know it happened because we did not give it to the connect method and call it through props is why. We just imported it and called the function. At that point, you know, that thunk function is like, I don't even know what that is. I just ran the function and returned one. What do you want me to do after that? So it's got to be connected to Redux to work. So the second argument in connect takes in an object. And this is where you put all of your dispatch actions. And you can just define this as get characters like that. And it will give it a get characters key that has the get characters function as a value. Or you could rename it. You could say, I don't know, get the things. We'll call it get the things, and that could be get characters. And you can do it like that if you want to change the name. But most of the time, like if I save this right now on my console log of props, we should see get the things. See how it's named get the things and it's labeled as a function? But if I just get rid of that key, it'll make get characters the function. So it automatically just inherits its naming when you do that. That's just JavaScript shorthand at work. So now that I have access to that in my props, if I go props dot and save this, when it runs, ooh, look, it went. And I got a console log down here. This is my console log from, let me see if I can move that out of the way. It's getting kind of annoying. There it goes. Here's my console log for my action, and I have data. My data has, it looks like the API was right. We got an info key that has all of our, page information, and then we have results. Results has characters in it, 20 of them it looks like. Cool. So let's go back to our action, and let's add that logic in. Here we'll dispatch object, dispatch object. Always going to have a type. This one's going to be success. Have a payload. Payload is going to be the response.data. And we're just going to grab all the things. We don't have to chain it back down to results. So there we have that. And we can actually change the way our initial state's done, which I might do that too. So, yeah, okay. So let's go to our reducer. I'm going to change the way the state's done rather than just having success. I'm going to have results. Try and match that API now that I know it's right. Results was an array. And I'm going to have info, which is an object. So this kind of is going to mimic our initial state there. And now we can start defining our cases. So before we define the cases, we want to bring them in. So we're going to import. I always like to just declare this as an empty object first, because then you can use the auto-completion real easy. So I can say error, and it kind of shows up right away. Success. And so if you get long-winded, names in there, you can use this and it'll help you out in loading. So now we'll go down here and we'll create our first case. Our first case is going to be loading. And what loading is going to do, it's going to return a copy of state. So we're going to spread it out. You always want to keep that immutability. And we're going to set our loading key to true. That's the end of that one. Now we're going to make our next case. This will be, we'll set up our error state. And that's going to return an object, a state object that's going to spread out state. We're going to set loading back to false, because if we got an error, it's no longer loading. And we're going to set our error. We're going to set it to the whole error object. So we're going to say action.payload. That way, when we're using our app, we can just grab that whole error object and we can grab the messages out of it. If there's any kind of actions like reload functions or something that might come with it, we can activate those. And it'll just give us access to all the cool stuff that comes with it. And then we're going to have our last case, which is going to be success. And success, I complicated this a little bit on purpose. So we're going to return a copy of state. We're going to set our loading back to false. So we want to make sure loading's false. Then we're going to set our info key. We're going to set that to the action.payload. And Remember, our payload is that whole object that came with the characters. So, which I don't have that console log yet. So it's basically whatever's in data here is our payload. So I can set it to info. So action.payload.info. And then I'm going to set my results to action.payload results. And the reason why I did this is, some components might need access to the characters, and some might only need access to the page info. And you don't want to bring in unnecessary data that you're not going to use in your components. That's the beauty of Redux and the reducer, is you can really break that apart to where you're not passing all kinds of data to all the components. You're just giving it exactly what it needs to operate. So with this done, we should be able to see our logger run some things. So, and we did here. So we got a couple error and console logs. Matter of fact, let me go ditch those so this looks a little cleaner and run that again. We really don't need a console log state anymore because we got it. Let's see, refresh. All right, so as you can see, our initial state hit with loading. All right, and it gave us an action of loading. Our previous state had loading false, so it's basically our initial state. And if you look, it set it to true, so we know that's working. And then we hit our success state. So we had error true, we had a type of success, we had a payload come in, and then our loading went back to false. Our results is an array of 20, and our info is an object. So now we can look into our state. We actually have this data now, and you can see the info is the info from the API. The results are the same results as we expected. So now we've got it. Now we can start, messing with things. We can start printing stuff to the screen. So I'm going to go in here to, I created that views, characters. You know what? That was more just for, this app's really too small for that. It's going to be kind of confusing. I'm just going to ditch that. And we're going to rename this. And I'll just go with the way you guys know, with a components folder. It might make it a little bit more confusing than what it needs to be right now. So I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to call this the header. And then I'm going to make another component called characters. I'm just kind of thinking about this as I go. And I'm going to make another one called character card, because I want to use like a container card system to display these. So I have these three right now. They're ready to go. I have a heading right here. So let's start by going into header. And I'm just going to, we'll do this the old school way. All right, actually, let's say, I believe it's RFC. Yeah. All right. And here I'm going to put my H1. I'm going to make this the Rick. And if I can spell. And Morty heading. And then under that, I'm going to add some buttons. And this one's going to be next. And just in case we get to it, this could be our pagination buttons. This will be previous. Save that. Got to export default, so we can go into our app now. We can import that in. Import components header. Come down here to where I'm returning this. And I'm going to say header, and then I can delete this. So nothing should look like it changes on the screen other than we got buttons. And we got next and previous. They look backwards though. Let's go fix that. That looks better. All right, so now we have a header that's going to have some functionality in it. now we can make our character container. So we have our characters component, RFC, which is a hotkey from the ES7. If you guys don't have it, the ES7 extension in VS Code. And it's got a bunch of little hotkeys for generating React functional components, class components, and things like that. So here we are going to have like a series of like cards that are going to be displayed that aren't going to do much of anything, but it's going to be our main container. But I do know that I want to connect this to Redux. So here I'm just going to put a p tag in place and just say here, because my linter will change things if I don't. And I'm going to connect this to Redux. So I'm going to import connect from React Redux. I'm going to get rid of this export default that's up here because it's hard to wrap a higher order doing it that way. And I'm going to put it down here. Connect. And here I'm going to give it characters. All right. So now we're kind of connected to Redux. We got to build our map state to props function. So const. And actually, we're going to go ahead and grab that from just over an app for time's sake. We're going to grab this. Copy. Go over to characters. Paste it right here. We'll drop it into connect. And here is probably also where we want to do our API call rather than on app. I like to keep app pretty clean to where it's only taken in, it's only rendering components and the subcomponents are the ones doing all the work. That way when you implement a bunch of routers and things, it's easy to maneuver. So use effect, this is going to be pretty much the same as it was before. We're going to need our action. Characters from state actions. So give that to connect. And if I'm going too fast, let me know. I can slow down. Characters. So now we got access to it through props. Let's go give the component the props. And let's invoke that in here. Props dot get characters or props dot get characters. Get characters invoked. So now we have that there. I can go into my app. And app, truthfully, does not need to be connected to Redux at all. So we can kind of ditch this stuff. You only want to connect the components that need to be connected. You don't just want to connect app and say, okay, I'm just going to give everything to app and then run down the chain. Kind of want to just keep that clean. Oh, erased a bit too much. We don't need any of this stuff, so we're cleaning up app pretty good. Now all we have to do is import our characters from components characters. And we'll invoke that below our header. We should refresh this and nothing explodes. Nothing exploded. Sweet. We're on a roll. All right. Oh, here's showing up now, my little placeholder. So we know we're good. And we can see that our state's still hitting. So we know we're connected with Redux on a new component. So now let's go ahead and build out our character card so we can start displaying things. So I'm going to go in here and just RFC, character card. Let's take a look at one of those characters and see what's available to us that we can print out on the screen. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Open it up. Is it going to open? Oh, it's mad. Is that why? Oh, I'm buried. Oh, am I doing that right now? Don't tell me I just did that. It's like my cardinal rule. Oh, I did. I hope I don't break it. I forgot the dependency, all right? Oh boy. Let's refresh to see if it hits. I might have just got us locked out. Man. Well, that's not very good. Let's see what their documentation is on that. Might have just blown it up. Well, at least they give us that stuff so we can keep rolling with it. What does it say the API limits are? API limits. Actually, it's acting like it's not even running. Let's console log the prompts. Should be hitting that action. My app break? My app broke. Let's try and restart it. When all else fails, restart. Because we should be seeing something in that console right now. And it loaded, and I still got nothing in my console. Why do I have nothing in the console? Compile with mornings. That's a missing dependency of props, but why am I not getting the props? Waiting for cache. Oh, it's still trying to do its thing. Crash the browser. Ooh. Live development issues. Yay. All right. All right. It's better. Huh, and it's, okay, so we're not broken. Cool. So let's take a look at this. And we can open up one of these character objects to see what's available. So we got created at, we got an episodes array of URLs, we got gender ID, we have an image, a location, a name, species status. Yeah, we can use all those things. Let's go start typing these things out. We'll give it like an H3. And actually, let's grab these out of props because we know these are going to be coming out of props. And I'm just going to destructure them. Let's see, we're going to have a name. We'll use species. We'll use status. The gender. Oh, we can use the location. Even though it's an object, we just have to chain into it a little bit. And let's use the image. And I think that might be enough for now. So let's start making these things. So we'll have this as the name. then I'm gonna have like a div. This one's gonna have like an image in it. Image and the source. We'll set equal to that image key. Close that up. We'll give it an alt. Gotta keep the screen readers happy. Alt will be just the name. We'll give it a series of p tags here. I'll have this location, colon, JavaScript. We'll say this is location dot name. Another p tag. This will be gender. Gender. Might be a few too many spaces. Shorten that up. Oh, what else we got? We got species and status. So let's display those. So we got a basic card component that's going to take those props and just kind of run with it. But it's not going to do anything yet. We got to put it in our characters and render it down here using a map method because we want to render however many we get into that array. So we're going to import character card from character card. And we're going to come down here where I typed in here. We're going to replace this with some JavaScript. So here we're going to say props dot characters dot map, and we're going to say for each character, we are going to return a character card. We're going to pass it the character equals. That should create us a bunch of cards. Let's see what happens. Oh, it blew it up. What's it not like? Characters.map is not a function. Oh, that's why, because I got to go state dot. Oh, let me take a look at my initial state. There's my, actually, it'll tell me right here. We need results. So we're going to say state.results is going to equal our characters component. Still cannot read property map of undefined. All right, let's comment that out and see why. Oop, not all of it.
You forgot the L.
I forgot the what?
The L.
Yes, I did. Good catch. I even put it in the wrong place. There we go. Nope. I'm tired today. All right. How is it gonna work? Okay, cannot read property name of undefined. So why is name undefined? Location.name. So let's go back into our character card. Let's comment that out for now. And we'll see why that is. Let's see if we get it to render. And it didn't render. Why? Well, this should hit 20 times, and we should see a character in there. Ah, I know why. Does anybody else know why? So we can actually destructure this in here. Character. This. Oh, props is not defined where. Oh, that's right. It's not anymore. Let's run that just to be certain. Oh, but we're working. We got some stuff. We got the things. Let's uncomment this. Run it again. And we got the things. So there, we got a name, we got our image, we got our locations, we got data, we got stuff on the screen. How are we doing on time? It's still under an hour. Want to do some page pagination? Like cycle the pages next to previous, make those buttons work? What do you guys think? Yeah, game? All right, let's do that. All right, so to do that, those are in the header. So we're going to have to connect header to Redux. But first, we're going to have to create an action that's going to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our actions. As soon as I remember where I put them. Actions. And I'm going to create another action. And I'm going to call this... now, it's going to give me a URL. I know that from the data set. Let's say, let me refresh this so we get rid of all them console logs. So if I look at my state, I know in info, I'm getting a next and previous, and it's going to give me a URL to point to. So I don't have to worry about writing a component or an action for next or an action for previous. I can just kind of make one that does both and just pass it this URL as its argument. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to say export const. We'll call this one, we'll call it change page. So that equal to, it's going to be a thunk, but it's going to take in a URL. It's going to be the argument for this one. And then it's going to take in dispatch because we're going to need that URL to dynamically make our Axios call. So here we'll dispatch object for the type loading. We're going to say Axios.get. And in this .get, I'm going to use backticks, $, curly braces, and that URL parameter. Then we're going to get a response. We don't know what that response looks like yet, so we always want to console log it. Oh, if I can even type console log anymore. Response, and then we're going to have our .catch, which is going to be the same as the one up there. We just want access to all of the errors. We'll go ahead and dispatch that. I'm just going to have a type error, and the payload is going to be that. All right, so we have an action that will do this that we pass a URL to. So let's go to our header and let's import that in and start getting that logic in place. So I'm going to import connect because I know I'm going to have to connect it to Redux. I'm going to import that action called change page. Let's start thinking out how I want to do this. So we're going to create a function in here. I'm going to call this, we'll call it handle page. I declared it first. Equal a function that is going to eventually call that function and go through it. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and connect this to Redux to access our state and get that those values we may want. So export default. Up, and then we're going to give it our header component. So now we're connected to Redux, and now let's get our state. So And here I can show you the, no, that might make a mess of it. Never mind. Map state to props. Take in state. We're going to return an object. We're going to say this is going to be, I want the info, but I'm going to just return state for now, just so I can take a look at it in case the object changes a little bit. And here I'm going to give it map state to props, and I'm going to give it that action, change page. So let's go back up to header. Let's bring in our props and take a look at them. We roll down here. Nothing hit yet. Let's refresh. Let's go find that console log. Oh, it's mad. Oh, it's complaining about the key. But here you see in our header, our info is our whole state. So we only want the info. So we're gonna make this state info. That's all we want there. And I gotta eliminate that key warning. It's gonna drive me nuts. So let me go into characters and fix that real quick. Key is going to equal programmer.id. That'll make that happy. So now if we look at our console log for the header now, info should just be our info object, and it is. So now if you look, we can have a little bit of fun with this because we have next, but we don't have previous because our previous doesn't exist yet. I'll show you where that can become a problem, why you would want to include some things in this. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add some on-clicks to this. On-click equals page change, and the same thing for next. Here and handle page change. We are going to we know we have those props there, that info. So we can just grab info out of there. We can destructure it because that's all we really need. We'll eliminate the console log. You already know what it looks like. You know we have it. And oh wait, I do need more than that out of there. So let's change that back to props. I forgot I need the method. So we'll leave that as props, and we will get, we'll say const just to make it readable. We'll get info. And what is it? Change page from props. Now we can access them directly. We're not typing in a bunch of props dot everywhere. So here we'll say change page, and we're going to pass it a parameter. Now we want to pass it the URL. So here we got the next, right? So we got handle change page. We're going to want to add a parameter to this. Create some space. We're going to say we're going to give this the URL path as well, and we're going to pass it down into here as URL. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to make these actual callbacks inside so we can pass a parameter to it. And what I want to pass is going to be what portion of state that I want. So right now, this is the previous button. I'd want to send it info.previous. And on the other button, we're going to want to send it info.next. Save that. That should work. Change page URL. Scroll down in our terminal. Nothing's happening yet. We'll give a good fresh refresh. Clear the console. And I'm going to click next and see if it explodes. You guys ready? Oh, it didn't explode. but we got a result, and it looks like the result is another array of our same. Oh, wait, where's my console log? There it is. Sorry. Data, info, and a result. So this is what we got back, and it's new characters, and it mirrors our state. So this is what I was talking about earlier when we set up our initial state. This is identical to the same case that we're going to run for our initial state when it comes in, like our initial API call. So we can go into our actions now that it mirrors that state. We can hop in here, and on our happy path here, in dispatch, the type of success again. Because that logic in the reducer is going to be exactly the same. If we do that, we got a fresh console. Clear this. Let's click next. Oh man, magic's happening. We're getting all of our pages. We can go back. We can go back. We can go back. But now watch. Now when I do this, nothing happens. The reason why nothing happens is because previous is null. So previous being null, this is where that user experience would come in on the header. So we're going to go fix that real quick. We can fix that with some quick conditionals. So we can basically wrap up both of these in JavaScript curly braces. And it's just a simple one-liner. You just say info dot, this is previous, and render this button. And same thing for this one. So if info dot next, and render this button. That's pretty much all we're doing there. So now when we do our initial load, you'll notice previous isn't there now, which is as expected. We don't want previous there because it wouldn't work. But when I click next, previous is now visible because we have a previous to go back to. And there's page pagination with another action with a variable dynamic URL. Any questions? Did I lose everybody? All right. Well, that's the gist of it. Nobody's got any questions. That's pretty much it. Tips for the sprint over the weekend. If you guys are looking for any tips for that, you're going to be doing a project. I believe it's called React Smurfs. And it's a very lightweight. It's not very style intensive. Like list of Smurfs like Pinky and Brainy and stuff. You're going to be required to fill out to create a form to create a new Smurf. You're going to have to create an action that, you're going to have your finite state machine with Redux in place, loading, error, all that stuff. Display an error message if there's an error. And it'll be on the form conditionals too. You'll have to validate that portion of the form to show that error. Let's see what else. You're going to have to do a GET request for an action to load the Smurfs, and you're going to have to do a post from your form through Redux to add a Smurf. And that's it. So if you guys are fuzzy at all on any of those materials, just study up on that, how to do the GET and post with Redux Thunk. And also just, you don't have to go to elaborate form validation. You can make it a simple validation, but you're going to be building a form using local state. When you go to submit the form, if a value is missing, have it populate the Redux state's error key with an error and display that. So other than that, good luck, everybody. And hit me up in the DMs if you got any more questions or have any issues. Have a good night.
Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank
No
you.
problem.
Thank you.